It's been 9 months, and Brazil still has a stranglehold on everything related to Rainbow Six. They keep winning LAN after LAN. Nothing's been able to stop them. BDS, Space Station, Dom1 Kia, they just kind of shrug everything off. They've won Paris, they've won Mexico City, they've won Hevle, and now they're coming to take Stockholm. And they also outnumber every other region by total number of teams going to this year's Six Invitational. So, buckle up, boys. This is going to be a long ride. 4 of the top teams from Brazil won a massive tournament last year, whether it be a major, BR6 finals, or the Invitational itself. They've all been different, and internationally have also secured multiple teams in the top 4 of every tournament. It's like they decided SSG defeating one of their own at SI 2020 was a personal offense because they broke through the glass ceiling and brought a couple of their friends with them. It's been whack to watch, and now it's time to figure out if Faze, NIP, Liquid, Team 1, Furia, or MIBR is capable of bringing a world championship back to Brazil for the 2nd year in a row. It's like 10 p.m. My hair is a mess, and I'm just gonna blitz through this. Let us begin with the current world champions, ninjas in pajamas. Julio, Kamikaze, Muzi, Pino, and Psycho. Didn't start the year off super hot in either BR6 or the Copa Elite 6 that followed it, but then they claimed Brazil's first world title at SI in May of last year. Not a single soul had that on their bingo cards to start the year, but nobody had 3 Brazilian teams in the top 3 of Invite either, so I guess this is where they really started to tighten the noose. After that, you would think they'd be able to keep that trend consistent, but even though they did have a better record in BR6 and CES in Stage 2, nobody anticipated that they would bomb out and essentially rage quit in groups of the Mexico Major. Rightfully so, everybody dunked on them, like myself included. More like the NIP error. And when they got back to BR6, that slump just continued. They barely scraped their way into the Sweden Major, but they still did, and pulled second at the BR6 finals. So NIP's trajectory last year looked like one massive wave. Meh to start the year, super high point when they won SI, then were extremely meh for most of the rest of the year before finding their stride again with 2 runner-up finishes at back-to-back events. These are your world champions, ladies and gentlemen. Too good to be flash in the pan one-offs, but also too inconsistent for me to be willing to spend any money betting on their final results. They essentially didn't have to try during the Stage 3 regular season because they'd already gotten enough wins throughout the year to guarantee they'd make it to the Copa Elite 6 for that stage, which is an issue with LATAM's rule set. Watch this video to learn more about it, but I just find it really funny how a team that placed essentially 9th in standings for one stage managed to get all the way to the grand finals of its corresponding major. I still think NIP are one of the favorites to win SI again and should be treated as such this year, but this has to be one of the most confusing attempts at a dynasty I think I've ever seen. The winners of the most recent international LAN are Faze Clan. And as you're about to see, I have way more understanding and respect for these guys currently. They acquired most of the MIBR team before the regular season started, which brought Bullet, Cyber, and Souls under the Faze banner and also reunited Astro and Cameraman. Pretty good start to the year, topping the BR6 charts before going out early in a CES that didn't really mean much of anything since there was no major attached to it. Great placement at SI, top 4 at the next BR6 stage, then went out in groups at the next CES, which meant they missed the Mexico Major. That was probably their one stumble all year long. Next stage, they came roaring back by securing a Sweden Major berth by taking that CES by storm, and then won the whole damn tournament over their Brazilian compatriots. Like, there's no better way to make up for having missed one major than winning the one just after it. They also got to the semifinals of the BR6 finals, but their task had already been completed by that point. But it's like I said, the only thing they really messed up on this year was failing to qualify for the Mexico Major. They were fantastic that stage, they just tripped up in the CES tournament. And later on in the year, they would make up for it. This is a team that has been consistently like top 4 all year long. I didn't know if the MIBR signing was going to work out the way Faze was hoping at the beginning of the year, but it wasn't a case of like completely restructuring roles or anything. They just booted up and got to work. And in order to make that last step up that I think inevitably catapulted them to that Sweden Major win, they got an analyst who was capable of handling more of the map workload, and it ensured that whatever battleground they played in Sweden, they were capable of playing at least their hearts out on. They are also one of my favorites to win the whole Invitational. Let me rephrase that. They are my favorites to win the whole Invitational, and I am saying that with far more faith than any other team in the entire tournament. If Brazil is going to do it again this year, it's probably going to be these guys. And the other major winner of 2021 is Team One, an unlikely combination of players that Monte Cristo called one of the most incredible underdog stories he'd ever seen in his time in esports. And coming from that man, it's a huge deal that they managed to accomplish what they did. The roster of Alemão, KDS, Lagonis, Levy, and Neskin got pulled from all corners of the Brazilian landscape back in March and progressively started getting more and more inspiring. Their BR6 campaign didn't start out too great, and neither did their SI run, but in Stage 2, things really began to move. 4th place heading into the Copa Elite 6, came in 2nd in that bracket. Then in Mexico, they not only survived a group that had BDS in it, but they also forced the first ever tiebreaker game in Siege history. They won that, then strolled through a playoff bracket that had Liquid and Empire in it, and snatched the major crown out from under the Russians' noses. Genuinely one of the best stories of the year. They did keep that momentum going for a bit, top 3 of the next BR6 and CES stage, but despite leading their group at the Sweden Major, lost to Rogue in the quarterfinals and didn't go anywhere at the BR6 finals. A pretty confusing end of the year for them. I have to wonder whether their slight dip in November came from every other team hyper-examining the formula that won them the Mexico Major, and they just weren't able to keep things fresh. I guess you could say the same thing about NIP's like crash post-SI, though for Team 1, this feels like a ship that is far easier to salvage. They're indisputably still a top 10 team in the world right now. I would question whether I'd put them in my own top 5, but as Brazilian teams go, they could win SI right now, and I doubt I'd be able to say I was shocked. Does that make sense? I have a feeling that doesn't make sense. The other 3 Brazilian teams didn't win an international event last year because the ones I just mentioned won all of the international events last year. But Team Liquid at least managed to get an SI Grand Finals and a domestic tournament win under their belt, so let's talk about that. With both Moringa and Sexy Cake on the roster, Liquid blitzed through most of the year. 2nd, 1st, 2nd at SI, 2nd, 3rd, then semifinals at the Mexico Major that they would drop to the eventual tournament winners. Fantastic results overall, but at this point, the team then decides to make a move that they hope will bring them from just under 1st place into that golden limelight. They replace Moringa and Sexy Cake with Ask and Resets. That combines their powers with Nesk, Paulu, and PSK, and it's a move I can't even really criticize that much. They got 2nd place for the 3rd straight BR6 stage running, but during that Copa Elite, they didn't take a map in playoffs, which was probably just the symptom of having too many new pieces to their puzzle. That would unfortunately mean they missed Sweden, but they went on to win the BR6 semifinals on LAN over NIP, so I guess that was their consolation prize. Ask and Resets, for their own part, look like they're working within Liquid structure pretty well. Nothing exemplary, but Ask is a solid support player, and Resets likes to take gunfights even if he doesn't always win them. It definitely seems like a move made to inject some young blood and adaptability into their lineup in the hopes of becoming the best version of themselves possible. Like, in some cases, you wouldn't even know that this roster made a change recently, and so far it only looks like an upgrade, which for Liquid means they can be incredibly scary in primetime. They're just in the group of death this year, but they are one of the teams who make it the group of death, and I'm absolutely placing them high. Just hope that the new guys don't let the spectacle of the Invitational pressure them too much. The last Latin American team to get to SI through standings points is Furia. They are a top 5 Brazilian team, for sure, but they always feel like the kid that tags along with a friend group to a party and doesn't really get involved that much. Did that analogy hit a little bit too hard for some people? They locked down their squad on Fantasy Highs, Lenda, Miracle, and Rare before the regular season started last year and have stuck firm with it ever since. They had middle-of-the-road standings at every BR6 stage, every Copa Elite 6. I dropped my pen. For some reason tonight, my fingers decided they wanted a prop. They made the Mexico Major playoffs only because Na'Vi didn't win a single game and then got slapped with the group of death in Sweden and didn't do almost anything there. And same with the BR6 finals. The main takeaway from this list is that Furia only got above 4th place one time throughout the whole year. Granted, a massive reason for that is because the rest of Brazil is so competitive with one another at such a high level that it feels like gods fighting in a bare-knuckle brawl. But Furia have just never really carved a name out for themselves. They're just kinda there. Fantasy has stepped up in a massive way, though. I won't take anything away from his pure mechanical skill with a crosshair, but one-star player does not make a worthy team. Maybe they can do good against international teams in their group, but they're currently trying to make themselves heard in a region full of top teams who are currently screaming much louder than they are. And the final team to qualify for SI through the LATAM qualifier, which just got rescheduled and flew all teams out to Stockholm so they could do it there, is MIBR. I think any other team winning that spot wouldn't have been a surprise, but there were times in that grand final where I thought Black Dragons were going to win it instead. Still, Falls, Fleapox, Luciad, Raps, and Reduct stuck with it and are now staying in Sweden waiting for SI to begin. Thing is, aside from getting third place at SI last year, nothing about this team was really that special. They had a super nice intro to 2021 with third and second place finishes in stage 1, and then surprised everyone by making the SI podium. Then Fleapox got sidelined with a shoulder injury, and the team were 10th in BR6 for the second stage, despite him still trying to play with a controller. And their then coach was also trying to play in his stead. This makes them the only Brazilian team of the 6 playing at this year's SI who were unable to make a Copa Elite 6 tournament for some reason in 2021. They really tried to turn the Jets on for stage 3, but this time they got to Copa and they just went out with a whimper in groups. They got to the BR6 semifinals, but they ultimately just missed out on both majors, which is the really big turning point here. They did withstand all of the bullshit of the Latin American qualifier and would eventually win it, but it took 5 maps in the grand final and they didn't look particularly strong until the last map. If you were looking for the weak point in Latin America's armor, MIBR is it, but even with that said, I still think there's a chance they could at least make it out of their group. It's going to be tough though, because they're doing this SI run without a coach, as Bodega stepped down in December due to internal issues, so I'm curious if that's a resource that's going to trip them up if they miss it. It was a pretty rough year for them. If they were playing with everybody at full strength, maybe they'd be able to hit the ground running after that SI result, but as it stands, they are the bottom of Brazil's contingent for this year. So, for the final time in this year's SI breakdowns, here's my personal ranking. It is totally possible for either Faze or NIP to take another land dub to start 2022 off, but you could say the same thing about Team 1 or Liquid, depending on if the latter manages to get their 2 players under wraps really well. Either way, it is going to be a gnarly one to watch, and now I'm done with all the breakdown videos, and I can sleep, except not for very long, because the predictions video is coming up next, and we're up in the ante this year a little bit, boys. Stay tuned for that right before SI kicks off. Also, Ubisoft yesterday did drop a couple blog posts, including information about Twitch drops and some changes to the schedule and the format. We've got a really freaking good playoff format now this year, and the panels got moved to the last days of the tournament, and Twitch drop changes are also a thing. I'm not saying Ubisoft watched that video I put out from a little bit ago, but it looks like things are heading in the right direction. So, hit up my Twitter, my Twitch, and this YouTube channel, blah, 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 blah. I'll see a predictions video next. Bye.